is, that you'd please to be so kind as to be my wedded wife. Week after next will suit me, if it's agreeable to you." My word, I were up on my feet in an instant. It were odd now, weren't it? I never thought of taking the fellow, and getting married. For all I'll not deny, I had been thinking it would be agreeable to be axed. But all at once I couldn't abide the chap. "Sir," says I, trying to look shamefaced as became the occasion, but for all that feeling a twittering round my mouth that I were afeard might end in a laugh, "Master Dixon, I'm obliged to you for the compliment, and thank ye all the same, but I think I'd prefer a single life." He looked mighty taken aback, but in a minute he cleared up, and was as sweet as ever. He still kept on his knees, and I wished he'd take himself up, but I reckon he thought it would give force to his words. Says he, "Think again, my dear Sally. I've a 4-roomed house, and furniture conformable, and £80 a year. You may never have such chance again." There were truth enough in that, but it was not pretty in the man to say it, and it put me up a bit. "As for that, neither you nor I can tell, Master Dixon. You're not the first chap as I've had down on his knees afore me, asking me to marry him. You see, I were thinking of John Rawson, only I thought there were no need to say he were on all fours. It were truth, he were on his knees, you know. And maybe you'll not be the last. Anyhow, I've no wish to change my condition just now." "I'll wait till Christmas," says he. "I've a pig as will be ready for killing then, so I must get married before that." Well now, would you believe it? The pig was a temptation. I'd a receipt for curing hams, as Miss Faith would never let me try, saying the old way were good enough. However, I resisted. Says I, very stern, because I felt I'd been wavering, "Master Dixon, once for all, pig or no pig, I'll not marry you. And if you'll take my advice, you'll get up off your knees. The flags is but damp yet, and it would be an awkward thing to have rheumatiz just before winter." With that he got up, stiff enough. He looked as sulky a chap as ever I clapped eyes on, and as he were so black and cross, I thought I'd done well, whatever came of the pig, to say no to him. "You may live to repent this," says he, very red. "But I'll not be hard upon ye. I'll give you another chance. I'll let you have the night to think about it, and I'll call in to hear your second thoughts, after chapel to-morrow." Well now, did ever you hear the like? But that is the way with all of them men, thinking so much of theirselves, and that it's but ask and have. They've never had me, though, and I shall be 61 next Martinmas, so there's not much time left for them to try me, I reckon. Well, when Jeremiah said that he put me up more than ever, and I says my first thoughts, second thoughts, and third thoughts is all one and the same, "You've but tempted me once, and that was when you spoke of your pig. But of yourself you're nothing to boast on, and so I'll bid you good night, and I'll keep my manners, or else, if I told the truth, I should say it had been a great loss of time listening to you. But I'll be civil, so good night." He never said a word, but went off as black as thunder, slamming the door after him. The master called me into prayers, but I can't say I could put my mind to them, for my heart was beating so. However, it was a comfort to have had an offer of holy matrimony, and though it flustered me, it made me think more of myself. In the night I began to wonder if I'd not been cruel and hard to him. You see, I were feverish like, and the old song of Barbary Allen would keep running in my head, and I thought I were Barbary, and he were young Jemmy Gray, and that maybe he'd die for love of me, and I pictured him to myself, lying on his deathbed, with his face turned to the wall, with deadly sorrow sighing, and I could have pinched myself for having been so like cruel Barbary Allen. And when I got up next day, I found it hard to think on the real Jerry Dixon I had seen the night before, apart from the sad and sorrowful Jerry I thought on a dying, when I were between sleeping and waking. And for many a day I turned sick when I heard the passing bell, for I thought it were the bell loud knelling, which were to break my heart with a sense of what I'd missed in saying no to Jerry, and so idling him with cruelty. But in less than a 3 week, I heard parish bells a-ringing merrily for a wedding, and in the course of the morning some one says to me, 'Hark, how the bells is ringing for Jerry Dixon's wedding!' And all on a sudden he changed back again from a heartbroken young fellow like Jemmy Gray into a stout, middle-aged man, ruddy complexioned, with a wart on his left cheek like life." Sally waited for some exclamation at the conclusion of her tale, but receiving none, she stepped softly to the bedside, and there lay Ruth, peaceful as death, with her baby on her breast. "I thought I'd lost some of my gifts if I could not talk a body to sleep," said Sally, in a satisfied and self-complacent tone. Youth is strong and powerful, and makes a hard battle against sorrow. So Ruth strove and strengthened, and her baby flourished accordingly, and before the little celandines were out on the hedge banks, or the white violets had sent forth their fragrance from the border under the south wall of Miss Benson's small garden, Ruth was able to carry her baby into that sheltered place on sunny days. She often wished to thank Mr Benson and his sister, but she did not know how to tell the deep gratitude she felt, and therefore she was silent, but they understood her silence well. One day, as she watched her sleeping child, she spoke to Miss Benson, with whom she happened to be alone. "Do you know of any cottage where the people are clean, and where they would not mind taking me in?" asked she. "Taking you in? What do you mean?" said Miss Benson, dropping her knitting, in order to observe Ruth more closely. "I mean," said Ruth, "where I might lodge with my baby. Any very poor place would do, only it must be clean, or he might be ill." "And what in the world do you want to go and lodge in a cottage for?" asked Miss Benson indignantly. Ruth did not lift up her eyes, but she spoke with a firmness which showed that she had considered the subject. "I think I could make dresses. I know I did not learn as much as I might, but perhaps I might do for servants and people who are not particular." "Servants are as particular as anyone," said Miss Benson, glad to lay hold of the first objection that she could. "Well, somebody who would be patient with me," said Ruth. "Nobody is patient over an ill-fitting gown," put in Miss Benson. "There's the stuff spoilt, and what not." "Perhaps I could find plain work to do," said Ruth very meekly. "That I could do very well. Mamma taught me, and I like to learn from her. If you would be so good, Miss Benson, you might tell people that I could do plain work very neatly and punctually and cheaply." "You'd get 6 pence a day, perhaps," said Miss Benson. "And who would take care of baby, I should like to know? Prettily he'd be neglected, would he not? Why, he'd have the croup and the typhus fever in no time, and be burnt to ashes after." "I have thought of all. Look how he sleeps. Hush, darling." For just at this point he began to cry, and to show his determination to be awake, as if in contradiction to his mother's words. Ruth took him up, and carried him about the room while she went on speaking. "Yes, just now I know he will not sleep, but very often he will, and in the night he always does." "And so you'd work in the night and kill yourself, and leave your poor baby an orphan? Ruth, I'm ashamed of you. Now, brother," Mr Benson had just come in, "is this not too bad of Ruth? Here she is planning to go away and leave us, just as I, at least, have grown so fond of baby, and he's beginning to know me." "Where were you thinking of going to, Ruth?" interrupted Mr Benson, with mild surprise. "Anywhere to be near you and Miss Benson, in any poor cottage where I might lodge very cheaply, and earn my livelihood by taking in plain sewing, and perhaps a little dressmaking, and where I could come and see you and dear Miss Benson sometimes, and bring baby." if he were not dead before then of some fever, or burn, or scald, poor neglected